Welcome back to Preventing FMLA Abuse. For those of you just joining us, we are on our example number 4 of real-life scenarios, how we can prevent FMLA abuse. This is Rebecca Shanlever. I am a labor and employment attorney with Hall, Arbery, Gilligan, Robertson, Shanlever. And here we are in example number 4. I call it working the system. This is a real-life scenario that happened with one of my clients, and it was one of the most difficult ones we had to work through. We managed it, and I'd like to share with all of you today this one and talk about how we managed it and how it could have been prevented. So, working the system. Mary is a new salesperson. She comes and tells you she's pregnant and is going to be having her baby soon. Congratulations, Mary. This is great news. Turns out her due date is going to be before she hits her 1-year anniversary. So she's not going to be eligible yet for FMLA leave when she has the baby. And under your company policies, she's also not going to be eligible yet for any paid leave. But what she does do is get an unpaid personal leave of absence that had to be approved by her supervisor for 4 weeks. At the end of the 4 weeks, the doctor releases her to come back to work, and she does come back. She comes back for a week, and that gets her to the 1-year anniversary. Mary comes and asks for her 12 weeks of FMLA leave to take care of her new baby, and asks for leave under your paid maternity leave policy, which kicked in on her 1-year anniversary. So is Mary working the system? Believe me, this was a difficult one, and my client thought that she was working the system. But this is what the FMLA rules are, and this is what the policies allowed in these circumstances. One important thing that you have to do in these situations is to consider what your unpaid leave policies do for employees and what impact they may have on an employee's FMLA rights. So again, this was a discretionary personal leave of absence that we granted to Mary, and what it did was get her to that eligibility date for FMLA. We gave her 4 weeks, and then that got her to that next anniversary date. It was just a timing issue, but that unpaid, discretionary personal leave of absence that we had provided to others who were in similar need for leave situations and hadn't got to their 1-year FMLA date had an impact on this situation, simply because it was leave for the birth or adoption of a child as opposed to some other medically related reason. So if you're going to have unpaid leave policies that are sort of discretionary, you have to think about what they will do, what impact they will have on FMLA leave. So here's, effectively what could have happened is that Mary would have been entitled to a total of 16 weeks of leave because we voluntarily gave her the 4 weeks. Then she came back, hit her anniversary date, and wanted to take those 12 weeks, which by then, by law, we were required to give her. So this is a good example of what can happen when you do something good for someone and allow that discretionary leave of absence. What we actually did in this situation was we saw it coming, and we knew what the impact would be of giving that 4 weeks of leave. So we sat down with Mary ahead of time and went over what our expectations were and what her expectations were. We did this before she ever went out on leave. It helped that in our situation, that Mary really wanted to get things lined up for her maternity leave. She really wanted to know what was expected and how long she could be out well before her baby came. So she was very happy to sit down and discuss all of this with us. And once we sat down and talked about it, we realized that Mary was not really trying to get a full 16 weeks of leave. All she wanted was, a total of the 12 weeks that she would have otherwise been entitled to. And so what we ended up doing was agreeing with Mary that she would take 12 weeks total and then come back to work. So there are, pros and cons to that solution. It was a good one for us in that scenario, and she could have insisted on taking more leave, but the reality was she didn't want to take any more because it was that the paid leave didn't go as long as the unpaid leave, and once the paid maternity leave, which we voluntarily provided, ran out, she wanted to come back to work. In other words, once she stopped getting paid, she was ready and needed to come back to work. So it ended up all working out. Another thing we can do in this scenario, and we did do in our situation, was to make sure that Mary used that paid maternity leave that the company provided along with her FMLA leave. And again, that was something that was written into our paid leave policy as well as our FMLA policy, that an employee has to use any paid leave that's provided concurrently with the FMLA. So in this situation, it all worked out. But it certainly was an opportunity for an employee who wanted to work the system and get as much leave as possible and protect her job to really work the system and use the FMLA to her greatest advantage. One thing to think about in terms of FMLA for this qualifying reason, which is birth of a child, is that the 12 weeks of leave had to be taken all in one chunk. Now, in this case, she had to come back for the week to reach that FMLA eligibility entitlement, but she isn't going to be allowed to take the 12 weeks of actual FMLA leave in little bits and pieces. The FMLA regulations say that leave for birth or adoption of a child can't be taken intermittently like leave for a serious health condition can be taken. So one good thing about birth or adoption leave is that it has to all be taken at one time, and you don't run into the difficulties that you do with intermittent leave in some of these other scenarios.